Funny. And I there Welcome everyone to In the Hot Seat. For our repeat viewers, thanks for joining us again. For those new to the show, every 2 weeks we put industry experts and our customers in the hot seat for what we hope is a lively discussion, some debate, maybe even a little discourse as we try to humanize the digital experience. All aspects of the customer lifecycle are up for discussion, as well as the technology that's used throughout each phase of the journey. Now, this episode is a continuation of our go-to-market series, and today we're going to take a look at the impact of rebranding on your go-to-market. So I'm excited about this one, Thomas. I think this will be really interesting.
No, of course it will be quite interesting, in particular, since I yesterday ran into an example of a apparently successful rebranding that I wasn't aware of. So basically, we ended up at Dunkin' Donuts with me expecting getting nothing but, well,
Donuts.
those thingies. Yeah.
That's the name.
Yeah, well, no more the name, as I realized today when having a look into that. So that's and that was one of the supposedly more successful ones. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that was fairly, and there's a lot of
Uh-oh.
let's see here. I shall fix that. Hopefully.
That's not a good rebranding.
No, definitely not. That's annoying. Am I on there? Let's see. Well,
you're not using a Sony camera, don't you?
No, I'm not actually. This is bizarre.
See, Sony is working.
You're right. Hold on, let me reset my camera and then I'll be back there.
Okay, so then let me go on with that a little. So interestingly, so what I learned today is that they rebranded, dropping the do not, and well, the reason is quite obvious. Other quite interesting examples. Oh, welcome back. Other quite interesting examples are, of course, like Gap.
Yeah,
that became
there's an ugly one. The Gap one was a really ugly one. They said they spent like $100 million on a new logo and then abandoned it a few like a year or so later because they had so much backlash from the customer base. So there was another one that I thought was funny when I just like look for a list of interesting brand rebrandings, and this one is not a company, it's an organization, but I thought it was interesting. It's the apparently in early 2000s, the Royal Mail in the UK tried to rebrand themselves as Consignia. Oops. And that did not go well. I mean, it is the mail, so I mean, you'd think that's a fairly good branding to start with, but what do I know?
Well, we don't have good experiences with letters, right?
Yeah, no, that's it. And I mean, and that's there's there's a lot of failures. Like I know Weight Watchers, they're rebranded WW. That was a good one that failed miserably. People had no idea what they did anymore. What's a double W? I don't, who knows? So anyway,
recently the company formerly known as Twitter.
Anyways, yeah, I was thinking about that one because that certainly is an example, a bad example, or a good example of a bad thing. I guess I don't know. Yeah, I mean it is a shame. I don't know what I think they. I mean there were like $20 billion loss in advertising revenue, something crazy like that afterwards. But of course, that's probably more than just the rebranding.
No, but that's probably something else than the rebranding.
What could actually be? You're right.
What do we know about rebranding? So, means we probably bring somebody in who does know a thing or two.
Exactly.
and coincidentally, we are today talking with Marcus Leeb, who is currently managing director of the EWAC group, which did a considerable rebranding. Before that, he worked at Pro-V as a CEO, as an interim CEO, doing some rebranding. Guess what? He was involved in the rebranding session and story of the company that's now called as Valantic, which is a consulting company. And well, before that, he apparently worked and lived as well. So he has a considerable experience in sales, marketing, and branding and rebranding. That's why, heck, let's just bring him in.
Yeah, sounds good.
So,
Hey,
hi,
Marcus.
Marcus. How are you?
Hi, Michael. Hi, Thomas. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I hope I didn't butcher your Vitae too much. So
no, that sounded great. It recalled something in my past. Thank you.
Nice.
Okay, so that one is out of the way. So now we have got a couple of good as well as bad examples that, well, some of them, well, they're all good examples, of course, but some
good examples
weren't.
of some good examples of good and some good examples of bad, I guess.
On bad, yeah. But why the heck does a company rebrand?
That's a pretty good question. I think there's tons of reasons. I can talk about my experience, why I have rebranded or we have rebranded. And so being in the IT services industry since 2.5 decades, this industry is more and more a commodity, right? So it's very hard to differentiate between companies and who is doing what and who is standing what for. And there's a lot of merger and acquisition and coming together. And so in older times, things were easy. There were maybe 3 or 4 companies which were known for certain services and products. And now there is hundreds, thousands of them standing for something. And I think it is the reasons I have seen is after a joint venture. When I was with HP and we have came together with CSC, became DXC, which is still hard for me to spell. I think that's maybe not the best example I have seen, being part of this rebranding team there, doing it in a quite complicated name, but building something new, which then should stand for something very unique and special in the future. This might be one of the reasons, or just try to get rid of maybe your old history. So I think Nokia is also a good example, coming from doing rubber boots, mobile phones, and now they are, I think, more or less a software company. So what does Nokia stand for, right? So, and I think they have never rebranded, basically. Maybe they've done tweaked a little bit on their logos, but you can still consider something and think something about their name. And I think this is one of the major reasons why companies do rebrand, because maybe they would like to go into a new market, or they would like to get rid of maybe an old history, or they would like to overcome certain obstacles they have in growth or certain other areas.
Well, when the companies go through this, and obviously it's a complicated process and something that they have to be very mindful about. But what are some of the challenges they face? What kind of pitfalls do they see, and then how do they get around those? How do they avoid them?
I think the bigger the companies get, the more they intend to have this inside-out thinking. And I think one of the pitfalls is that companies think very much about themselves, and they do not immediately think what maybe the market think about them or should think about them. So I think one of the major pitfalls is that if you have a dream and you would like to be a certain company with a certain branding, and you just go in that direction, and the market does not even understand what you're going to do. They don't see you completely differently. And I think this is one of the major pitfalls, this inside-out thinking, except in the opposite, outside-in thinking. Thinking is, what does your clients really know? I think one of the pitfalls is companies many times do not really hear what their customers or maybe competitors say about them.
In how far, in how far communication obviously is key in that, but where does it kick in? Communication, does the need for communication already kick in, avoiding this pitfall far before one does or considers a rebranding, executes a rebranding, or does that become only important at the point in time? Well, when you're saying, okay, flicking the switch from HPE to DXC.
Yeah.
Is there any preparation work that probably is, or preparational communication that should be done?
I think if companies do come together, there is basically two options. So one company is absorbing the other company, and let's say the old brand of this absorbed company is just gone. Or these two companies want to have a new brand. And the communication, I think my experiences should start before you are going to even consider in what direction you go. You have to first evaluate how you are seen in the different markets and from the client side. So what does the client associate with your brand? I mean, if we have one of these AAA brands like Coca-Cola, everybody associates with this brand. You can talk to everybody in the world, everybody knows Coca-Cola. They would be completely stupid by rebranding. Yeah? And but as I said, so this IT services market is very commoditized. So there is many players in the market, and it's very hard to differentiate. It's very hard to stand for something, that a brand has a core value. It could be in IT, it could be security, it could be global reach, it could be maybe some association to a certain region or something. And I think this is where the communication should start, by doing a proper analysis on the different markets.
I mean, we talk a lot about impact on the customer, and that's really seems really obvious, right? I mean, that's I certainly want to keep the customers engaged. I'm trying to build a business, grow a business, blah, blah, whatever. But internally, I've seen this a lot of times too. The internal issues can sometimes be the thing that derails it, or certainly causes a lot of pain to the company. So how do you how should companies think about that? How do they manage resistance or hesitancy, or honestly just building support among those internal stakeholders?
Basically, I think this is one of the most complicated paths you have to go, right? People are very different, and people do, again, associate something with their own company. Maybe they are working with since, I don't know, many years, also some values and personal history and so on and so on. And I have had colleagues in my career which came from acquisitions, maybe like EDS or other companies like Sun Microsystems, and they still felt like the old EDS guys, even if we have already rebranded 5 times or something, and we've down the path for a long way. And I think there is no golden rule, basically. The question is how much basis democratic system you would like to enable by doing that. And I've been with Accenture for some years, and before that it was Anderson Consulting, and they wanted to get rid of this Anderson stuff, as Arthur Anderson, everybody knows, was maybe not a very good story in regards of the Enrons topic. And they have run quite a huge branding and naming thing over, I think, 1.5 years with a lot of agencies, and I'm sure they have spent a lot of money. And then there was one of the internal partners who came to that idea and said, why don't we use the name Accenture? And then we all voted. So this led a bit to maybe not for everybody, but I felt good with it, that I had a voice, right?
Mhm.
And there were 2 or 3 options. I don't remember well at this moment, but you had the option to choose between 2 or 3 brands. And this made me felt as an employee at this time as being part of this future decision.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense,
Yeah.
but I'm curious about the next step, and that is, okay, how do you build the brand ambassadors out of those employees? I mean, how do you make sure that you get the leadership all the way down to to everybody, all the employees really being an ambassador to help with that customer transition?
Well, from a technical perspective, if you do a rebranding, I have seen the slow way by, let's say, first of all, you keep the logo and you just tweak the name a bit, and then you do the next step that you change the logo and then you change the name. This I have never liked that much, especially from an employee side. So from a technical perspective, I think it's easier you do the big bang approach. That, let's say now we have March, on the 1st of April, we all come to the office. The office is branded completely new. Everybody has maybe a little gift on the table, like a pencil and I don't know, a cup or whatever with a new brand, the new name, and everything like that. I think that makes it easier for everybody to say, okay, I can identify because we're all the same now. From how you build the ambassadors, was your question, is on all the different layers.
Yeah.
I think you have to do it like you always have to do it with your staff. You have to identify the people who like change. And people who do not like change, they will never be a good ambassador. You need the people who say, okay, let's give it a try. I like this, it's a good idea. People who also, maybe not the highest ranks, but people who have a good voice, where people are listening to them and people say, okay, if this person is going in that direction, it couldn't be that bad.
Looking at various depths of rebranding or various intensities of rebranding, like let's for example look at BP. When was that? In the early noughts, I think, when they changed their logo to this flower thing that they have right now.
Yeah, the green flower.
Yeah, or Coca-Cola just doing a refresh of the styling once in a while. We had Dunkin', which has been Dunkin' Donuts a while ago, or DXC, using that as an example, or Twitter, Facebook as examples, which did a major change of their identity, basically. Are there different do's and don'ts that one needs to go through from an internal as well as from an external communications point of view?
I think it depends on what kind of level of rebranding you would like to do. If you would like to do like a reset, like DXC. DXC was a reset that we merged 2 companies and there is something new. Okay. But if you have, maybe look into Coke or maybe even Deutsche Bank, they're also tweaking the logo a little bit from year to year in colors and flavors.
SAP.
I think this is more like a new car model. Let's say a BMW 5 Series. You will identify a 5 Series which is 20 years old immediately, and you will also identify a new one. They look different, but you will still see that's more or less the same thing. And I think this is, if you would like to keep the heritage with you with the good values, but you would like to refresh it a bit and maybe make it a little bit more modern, that it fits into, let's say, the new value and climate thing, and like BP does. I mean, they're an oil company, right? They still are. And but of course they understood that there is maybe a little bit more than just oil drilling in the future. It's more like energy and this kind of stuff. So I think they still would like just to modernize a little bit on their way in the future.
And what would you say to a rebranding like Facebook to Meta, which is something that just suggests a totally different identity?
This is one of the rebranding I still do not get. Maybe this has a taxation reason or whatever, something which I do not know. For me, Facebook is still such a brand. And Meta is, for me, is a great company, but it's not a brand. It's like Google and Alphabet. It's the same, right? We all know that Google was the search engine. We know that. And Amazon has not done this, interestingly, right? So you still have this frame Amazon. It's Amazon Web Services. It's Amazon Prime. It's Amazon this and that. So you immediately, they are not throwing away this great brand. I don't understand why they have done it with Facebook. Maybe there were good reasons, which I don't know.
You know, there was a lot of discussion at Salesforce recently about possibly changing their name once they really went heavy into Agentforce and agentic AI. And I'm curious what you think about that. I mean, obviously they decided not to do that, but I mean, what do you think? Is there enough brand equity in that Salesforce brand that you wouldn't ever really want to touch that? Or, you know, why do you think they decided that?
I think there is still this outside-in topic. So everybody has heard more or less the name Salesforce. Maybe everybody does not fully understand what they're really doing, but I think the majority of us know they have to do something with CRM.
With sales too.
Yeah, with sales. Enforce somehow. And,
somehow.
Somehow. Of course, they are doing much more in the meantime. Much more. It's a big ERP, whatever. I don't know what they're all doing. I think it is their internal struggle. They would like to communicate to the market that they're doing more than just being the CRM Salesforce company, which they're obviously not. But it's a great brand, and it's very hard to build such a brand. Very hard. It costs a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of luck.
Oh, why luck?
Yeah, you have to be lucky, right?
Yeah, no, better to be lucky than good.
But it's interesting to hear that. So, what has luck to do with it?
You have to have the right product at the right time in the right market, and I think Salesforce is a good example. They have developed software as a service model at a time of many others. So now it's again commodity, but they have been ahead of time. And that's for me a piece of luck, a little bit, or being bold and doing the investment and going down that path and name it as you like.
But they are also like Coca-Cola, for example. Their brand is sort of limiting themselves. I mean, if I think of Coca-Cola company, they don't make Coke only. So there's lots of other things that are not mentioned in that brand, like in Salesforce as well. You just said it. So, at what point in time can that start to harm? That the brand name is limiting.
I mean, I'm running a company which has a very German name. E-Werk stands for power plant, more or less. But we have to do nothing with power plants. We're an IT company. Yeah,
I was confused when I stumbled across you guys initially.
This is definitely harming somehow in regards of that. If you say that name, people do not immediately associate that with maybe what we would like them to associate with. This has historical reasons, but I'm sure that Coca-Cola will never throw away the Coca-Cola brand because they would like to sell more, I don't know, whatever, water in the future or burgers. I don't know what they're in.
Burgers, yeah, that would be
Or-
good, yeah. that would be a real new thing.
Well, yeah, when companies go through this process and then obviously trying to assess the success of it or not, what kind of metrics should they be like focused on? What KPIs are important here to prioritize so that they can tell if it was successful and, if not, optimize it in some ways to try to recover some of that brand equity?
Yeah, I think there is this classic marketing KPIs you have to focus on. So that do you have hits on your webpage in regards of the name? What do people associate with the name or with the brand? Customer churn, or if you do classic customer interviews and let them associate something with your brand. I think that's quite important that you do that while you do the rebranding and after you have done it. So what I see, that rebranding is not over after you have had your new brand on new logo on your walls. I think then it really starts. I was very puzzled any time when I talk to clients and clients we have maybe since 10 or 15 years we're doing services for. They should know us, and we are doing critical stuff for them. And interestingly, if I meet them over a lunch or a dinner and I tell them what all we are doing in different services and here and there, the majority of them don't know. They're just buying one thing with us, or maybe they're just buying or just having one service. It's very hard to communicate your full portfolio alongside with a brand. And I think the branding, it does not stop after you have either maybe branded with a new name or a new logo or something. It is an ongoing journey.
How long does it take till a brand gets recognized at about the same level as the old one by customers, partners?
It depends on how much money you have. And basically, it's a very time-consuming thing, because we all know that you basically need 7 contacts to recognize something or recall something. And nowadays there is tons, I wouldn't call it information, tons of data flowing into us in all these feed-based information models like LinkedIn and Sing and whatever, and Facebook and I don't know, and Instagram. It is very hard to bring something in that part of the brain where the memory really keeps it. And I think that my experience is you should consider a year minimum to have your clients recalling, understanding, and let's say a little bit forgetting the old brand. So this is especially when I was with Valantic, we have rebranded quite a good number of companies we have acquired, and it always took the employees and the customers approximately a year until they have stopped to talk like the old names when we were this and this company, or also on customer side that they immediately identify you with a new name. I think that's my personal experience. It took us in average a year.
Yeah, talking about that one in particular, I was asked by a partner of ours after 1.5 years who the heck we are,
Right.
what we are doing. So they remembered when I gave them the old name of my competence center.
And Thomas, you just asked the question about communication, and we all get a lot of emails and messages and so on and so on.
Yeah, that's why I asked you, because in my limited experience, actually, there are a couple of more rebrandings as well, but I thought that this was a pretty well communicated change.
It was. Indeed, it was. But this is this inside out view again. So you think you have communicated. I mean, the majority of us have kids. How many times do we tell them something and we think we have told it? The message gets lost somewhere in the outer rim or somewhere else.
Repetition is an important concept.
If your kids are sort of like mine, they decide what they hear, how they hear it, what they want to hear. And
selective hearing loss. And I that's probably true with customers too, right?
I think it is. And of course, I mean, if you talk to customers, maybe you are not the most important thing in their life. Maybe you're just one of their vendors, right? They're dealing with 5, 8, or 10 others. Or they may be facing, and also if you talk to employees, maybe they're facing internal personal problems whatsoever. Yeah.
What happens when it goes wrong? What should companies do when they start to get that backlash? I mean, how do you handle that? How do you deal with that?
I can remember 1 or 2 examples where it went wrong terribly, and my personal experience is kill it fast. And kill it fast means if you see it's going wrong terribly, stop it. Then you're Royal Mail again, or your company XYZ again, and just close this chapter and concentrate on something which is more important than just the branding in the moment, because you're losing a lot of time and effort. And if the market is and the customers and the employees are not going in that direction, it's not in your hands, right? You are fighting against windmills, and this, we all know, doesn't work out well.
Yeah, tilting windmills probably not a good choice. That's
yeah.
Well, you know, the other thing I was curious about when you think about this messaging and communication and all that is that I mean, marketing obviously deeply involved in this, but how do you get the sales team, sales enablement, sales ops, sales, oriented towards all of this change? I mean, is it as simple as this communication rolling out, in a planned way, or are there other tricks you think that companies should think about when they're dealing with sales?
Basically, my experience is for sales, it's a great opportunity because it's an opportunity to reach out to their clients. And maybe showing up personally and maybe making a little, I don't know, replacing the coffee mug, the old branded one with a new branded one, and having some airtime. But it has to be orchestrated very well. So it is not like the sales rep is just going to the client and telling them over a lunch, and hey, by the way, it should be very well orchestrated also on a hierarchy level. So that each level is addressed by the right level in that regards. And then I think it's very good for the sales team at this point of time to have a direct conversation with their clients. Because if the clients say, hey, you are completely nuts, what kind of crazy name you found there, then it's also an important feedback you should consider as a company.
I mean, it's almost like you're saying to consider this an opportunity. Maybe that's the way you pitch it to the sales team. Like, look, here's an opportunity. Here's how we want you to go roll this out with your customers and prospects, and
also and there's also a legal perspective we have to take into accordance, because it depends on which region you are in the world. But normally contracts have a company name associated with it, right? So you have a name in it. And if you are changing the company name or the brand or something, you also have some of the contracts which need to approve that. That depends on, especially government clients intend to have these kind of rules. So this also has to be taken into consideration, so that there could be some, let's say, headwind from some clients because they do not want to have maybe a new invoice coming in. They have now to add a new vendor in their ERP system. And there's many things which you have really to take into account. And also, especially if you are in the recruiting market. So maybe you have a certain branding on Glassdoor or Konuno. What are you doing then? You're throwing away that if you have a good one? Or is the company formerly known as? Or how are you going to transform that?
Is there a natural sequence of steps one needs to do if one, or needs to take if one does a name rebranding, basically from name A to name B?
I think there is some good checklists you can work on. I think it's if you do that, you can be quite sure many companies have done this ahead of you. So and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So especially from a technical perspective, what you have to do and where you have to reach out and what kind of polls you would have to do with your teams and your clients and so on, what kind of legal perspective. And also if you maybe, very interestingly, the car producers, if they're producing a new model, for example, they are checking the name in many different languages, because a certain name can mean something very different, maybe in Spanish than maybe in English or in German or maybe in, I don't know, in Chinese. So also this has to be taken in advance into consideration. If you're a company which has clients around the world, that you don't use the wrong name, which gives the completely wrong impression. Also, this has happened before.
Yeah, I mean, what's the famous Ford example, the Pinto, when they tried to sell Pinto in Mexico, they found out that means it blows up or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, not a good name brand.
Not a good name. Exactly. Yeah. And I think this, Thomas, this should be part of such a checklist, so to say. Yeah. Check the name in all the different languages. You don't have to do it your own. So this is the reason why you have naming agencies. They're taking care about that stuff.
Sounds like a good exercise for AI.
Yeah, I think AI can help a lot.
But this probably also a case for artificial names. So if I'm looking at Valantic, I can remember that the first choice was another name.
Exactly.
So in how well that was already taken. So not was because it was a bad one, but I think was already taken. So if I was right there, if I'm right there, that also suggests that preparation work, back to strategy or strategizing a rebranding, takes some considerable time. So what's on average the lead time for needed till one is about ready to execute the rebranding?
Again, of course, it depends on what company size we're talking about, right? And how many regions and so on and so on. My personal experience is it took a year to come to that point to rebrand, and then it took us a year to establish the brand, minimum a year. So it is not something where, say, in 3 months we're doing a rebranding. You should consider a budget year. And it has to be part of the budget as well. I mean, if you're running a company, it will cost you money.
Yep.
And it will also cost you people's time.
You know, a lot of times companies, especially smaller tech companies, when we're rebranding, the truth is we're doing a pivot into something different, or we're trying to move to a completely new way of using the product or a different product or whatever. But there are a lot of times when the brand is strong, and I mean the Dunkin' Donuts one is a good example, right? Dunkin' Donuts, Dunkin'. I mean, they have kept an element of the original, and I assume they did that to try to leverage the brand equity they already had, but then show they had gone in some new direction. So how do companies think about that? I mean, how do you keep your brand heritage at the same time go towards this new thing that you think you need to do for whatever reason?
not to lose your heritage. First of all, you have to understand what is the core of your brand. What do you really stand for? And not only what you would like to stand for, what you really stand for. What does your customers and your employees and your partners see you? What would they say is the core of your value? What are you really standing for? And if you have identified that, that's the reason I say it takes you a year, because this has to be the first step of a rebranding. You have to understand what is something you would like to keep, what is the core, what is a value, what is good. And then you have to associate and transport this core value to the new brand. That's very important. If you don't do that, you're diluting completely, and I think people will never understand why you have changed your brand.
Or maybe not even associate correctly, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you move too far in one direction, maybe you don't even really get any of that heritage
Exactly.
to move with you, or the equity with you.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which might at times be what is the intention, actually.
Well, that is probably
sometimes
there are times.
Sometimes it could be. Yeah, sometimes it could be that you have a clear cut maybe with the heritage and you would like to do something new. That's perfectly fine. But you should also then consider that you are really capable to do that, what you would like to stand for, right? Mm-hmm. That maybe you're not selling old wine in or the same wine just in a different glass.
Which often it probably is, right? Because I mean, you said Accenture, they wanted to get rid of the bad reputation of a part of the acquisitions.
Absolutely.
So, and after all, I mean, what are they doing? They did this. They are doing the same as they did before.
Yeah. But I think this was a successful rebranding from my personal perspective. It worked out well. And they also have done an IPO at the same time. So they have done quite a lot of change at this time. But that's quite an agile organization. So I'm sure this will not work maybe with many government organizations where just maybe the US Postal or something maybe are not as agile. I don't know them, but I would consider them not to be as agile as a consulting company.
Yeah, I would expect. I mean, I guess you never know, but
yeah.
Interesting.
Looking at Accenture, I mean, they also have. I don't want to bash on them, but let's say their name invited for a nickname, Accidenture. And in how far should those types of possible connotations be a consideration as well?
Again,
are they foreseeable at all?
I think this is something what will always somehow happen, right? So I've been working for IBM, and IBM people said I've been moved, and so that's all these acronyms you can build fancy stuff around. But I mean, IBM is a good example. The name is International Business Machines. That's very boring, right? Mm-hmm. But nobody cares. Everybody associates just, okay, they're doing some IT and computers and software and this kind of stuff. The name
maybe in the 1920s when they were selling cash registers, that was a good name.
Exactly. Yeah. I think
things change.
That's true. Yeah, things change. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There again, similar one as SAP, right? So SAP is an abbreviation.
Exactly. Yeah.
So but then it's also an abbreviation for lots of funny terms of that.
Yeah, many funny.
Well, I was going to say that might be one where they didn't test the cultural appropriateness of that in all areas where they do business. So,
oh well, they started as a small 5-people German. Well, actually, a consultancy more or less. And well, they wanted to productize something, but worked more or less as a consultancy, and well, a 5-person shop. They probably didn't have in mind to become a.
And they were all IBM engineers, so they came from a 3-letter abbreviation company, and they have built a new 3-letter abbreviation company.
I guess that's what needs normal if that's where
you've been. Exactly. I don't know.
But hey, so we are hitting our time, which is bad or good.
It depends.
It just is.
It depends, yeah. So in general, so this was what we wanted to cover today, Marcus. Thanks a lot. The good news is you survived.
Okay, thank you guys. It went well.
The bad news is we didn't really try to make you not survive. So
well, that's not bad. I think that's good. I feel like running guest away is not a good way to build a brand either.
Yeah,
yeah, indeed.
Good point. So thanks a lot for your time and your insight. This is an incredibly difficult and, well, not so obvious topic that we went through it. So there are lots of hidden moving parts in any rebranding. So thanks a lot for this. So for the audience, so if you think you have what it takes to be in the hot seat, well, we'd love to hear from you. And then we get into it. This is the hot seat for today. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm Thomas Wieberneit.
And I'm Michael Fauscette. Tune in next time for different faces, different topics, different perspectives as we put someone different in the hot seat.